All in Sports Network. We love sports.
It is Friday. It is Friday, November 8th. And this is All in Horns, your daily fix for all things Texas Longhorns, right here, brought to you by Rogue Sports Network. I'm Tanner Carlson. That's Jake Jimerson. We release these episodes Monday through Friday, each and every single day, dropping at noon. And then on Saturday, we let the football dictate our timing of the show, and we will release our immediate reaction following the Texas Longhorn game. Today, we are going to give you Week 11 predictions after we give you a breakdown of the Texas-Florida matchup, how this defense is going to respond to whatever quarterback or whoever is going to play quarterback for the Florida Gators, and then also how is this offense going to attack a very aggressive Florida Gator defense. And then we will also finish off this show with some Saturday slate of games and matchups that could possibly or inevitably going to affect the 12-team college football playoffs. Again, I'm Tanner Carlson. That's Jake Jimerson. Jake, going into Saturday, man, it feels like it's been a long time since we've been eager to watch the Longhorns play on a Saturday. These bye weeks just seem like they take so much longer now with the anticipation of having a team as good as Texas being the number 5 team. And then you get to watch, last week's games and you're like, ooh, a Penn State or an Ohio State's going down. That's going to help Texas in the rankings. LSU, Texas A&M, or South Carolina A&M. That's a big game. That was a huge implication on the future of Texas this season. It seems like so many more games have such a bigger impact on the rest of the college football field. Honestly, who had the biggest week of college football last week, who didn't even play, was probably Colorado in the Big 12.
Yeah, I mean, Colorado or Texas, they definitely won the bye week. If you're Texas, you wanted A&M to lose, not only because they're the Aggies, but because it helps with the SEC standings. And then for Colorado, they're right back square in the race to win the Big 12 again. And the Big 12 is really anyone's game. You would favor BYU right now, but they definitely haven't looked unbeatable, much like Iowa State didn't look unbeatable. And then they fell to Texas Tech, which was another big reason why it was such a big weekend for Colorado. But it, as I have said all season, I'm going to continue to harp it because I just want to dance on the grave of all the idiots, is that this 12-team playoff format makes so many more games matter. You just look at it this weekend, an Ole Miss at number 16. This game matters for them. It's not they're just trying to get into an NY6 game. If they win out, they're probably in the playoff as a 2-loss team, especially with the win over Georgia.
Mm-hmm.
So this is an elimination game for Ole Miss. You look at Indiana. If they win this game, even if they lose to Ohio State, they can win that last game of the season and make the playoffs. So this game is really important for them, because if they win this, their chances to be in the playoffs have to be 80% or above.
Yeah.
And then you have, Colorado, Texas Tech. That's a big one. And we're going to discuss a lot of these games later on, but you just have so many more games that matter with it not being a 14 playoff. At this point in the year, you'd be able to write off most of these 2-loss teams. And now you just cannot do that. And it just makes it more fun because a lot of these teams like an Ole Miss, who are really, really talented, but had some games earlier in the year, have maybe caught their stride a little bit now. That's a team that if they get hot, they're not a team I'd want to go against in the playoffs.
Absolutely not. And, I always kind of look at these teams in terms of where they're ranked and the matchups that would take place, in terms of who got snubbed or who's overrated or who's underrated. And I look at it as, would I want my team to play this team in a playoff game on a neutral-sided field? And Indiana is definitely one of those teams where I would not want to play against on a neutral-sided field. Or even if Texas hosted Indiana, I would feel a little bit better, but I still would. Indiana would scare the crap out of me. Boise State, I think, could possibly play spoiler depending on who that 5 seed is going to be, Jake. I think there's a lot of these teams that I'm just thinking in the back of my head, I'm like, man, if Texas has a bad draw, could be a short-lived playoff year, for a lot of these teams that have, like an Ole Miss getting in late, if they sneak in at the very late and they're like an 11 seed or a 10 seed, you know how tough of a game that's going to be. Whoever draws them as a home game, as a 6 or 5 seed. I mean, Jake, there's a lot of potential games that may not even be considered upsets whenever they play them come first round of the playoffs.
Yeah, and it's in a year where everyone has looked beatable at one point or another, other than maybe Indiana. Is you're going to have to play your best football in the playoffs, and that's going to be the hardest time to play your best football because everyone's going to be missing players. Everyone's going to have players playing banged up. And that's where depth is really going to come into play. That's where strategy is really going to come into play. And it's going to be really interesting to see how, if you're undefeated and you're going into your last week and you have a guy who's even just kind of hurting, do you sit the player for that game, especially if it's not like a win and get into the conference title game? And so it's going to be interesting to see how some of the late game strategies fold out for teams that are basically locked into the playoffs. And then it's going to be fun to see if there's just a team that has 2 losses that you don't expect to get in, like an Ole Miss, or even like a Kansas State if they run the table in the Big 12, or an Alabama if they run the table. And then all of a sudden they play spoiler and they get hot and they make a run to the title game. Even an SMU could be included in that, who we both thought should be ranked higher. So it's going to be very exciting every week to just follow this and watch it play out. Because like you said, I think we're going to get a lot of really fun matchups very early on that are going to provide a lot of entertaining and close games.
Yeah, and Jake, let's go ahead and focus in on the Texas-Florida game. We haven't really been able to dive too deep in it with just obviously the news of the College Football Playoff Committee coming out with their first poll and the first projected standings and how the 12-team playoff is going to look. Jake, let's dive in to Florida. What are we expecting offensively, whether that be players, whether that be schematics, whatever that looks like? What does Texas need to watch out for against this Florida Gator team who is playing with a lot of heart? They're playing with a purpose. And I don't know what Billy Napier got them to eat within their Wheaties to get them to have this believing feeling after what looked to be a horrendous season ending first 3 weeks of the year for this Florida Gators team. They're playing inspired football right now, and they're a team that, despite their record, is playing much better than its record.
Yeah, Sarkisian has said it this week in some of his pressers. Florida is a team that's gotten better every single week this season. That is the most accurate way to display them, because they did start out the season bad. They did not look like a good football team. They still show weaknesses, but they have gotten better. And what stands out about Florida is, I talked about it on, I believe, Tuesday's show. This is where you see a difference between the SEC and the Big 12. This is not or maybe Iowa State's a bad example because they're good this year. This is not a Texas Tech. This is not a Baylor. This is a team that is, as far as talent wise, they have a lot of talent. They have a lot of players who are going to play on Sundays. They have a lot of size. They have a lot of speed, and they have a lot of physicality. And on the offensive side of the ball, a lot of things really just depend on if DJ Lagway plays. If he plays, how much can he be involved in the running game? That will play into it. Because I think we are going to see Florida run the ball a lot. Their leading rusher, Montrell Johnson, is questionable for Sunday, but Florida has a lot of depth at running back, including a true freshman. It's kind of an old school style running back, Jaden Ball. He weighs 230 pounds. He's a power back. He had 5 touchdowns against Kentucky in their blowout win over Kentucky. And he is a physical runner and kind of like a Gibson, but bigger, where he is just going to try to run over you and through you. And then you have Jacoby Jackson, who I mentioned on Tuesday, had a good game against Georgia. He is the lightning to Ball's thunder. He's very quick. He's very slashy. He makes a lot of moves. He can make you miss in space. And so tackling, as it is every week, is going to be very pivotal in this game, but kind of in different ways, where you're going to have a physical runner that's really going to challenge you to just wrap him up and bring him down and not let him drive through you. And then you have a tackler that you're gonna have to make sure it doesn't just make you look silly in open field. And then you look at the Georgia offensive line. The left side of their offensive line has been has been the problem area for them, kind of the opposite of Texas, where the right side's been the bad side. The right side of the offensive line has been a lot stronger. So they're probably going to try a lot of runs off of that right side of the offensive line. But I think Texas can generate a lot of pressure against this offensive line if they get Florida, kind of like Mississippi State, where they got Mississippi State into a position where they had to do a standard passing game, and then all of a sudden the sacks just started piling in. And that's something I think Texas could do this weekend, whether that be against a slowed down DJ Lagway or it be against the backup whose name's escaping me.
Yeah, Jake, you've got your starting quarterback, your leading rusher, and your leading wide receiver for the Florida Gators all on the injury report listed as questionable. Maybe some more probable than questionable, maybe some more doubtful than questionable, but nonetheless, the leading offensive players for Florida who they're going to desperately need, whether that be Elijah Badger at wide receiver, whether that be Montrell Johnson at running back, or DJ Lagway at quarterback, is they're going to need those guys to play their best. And even if they're banged up and they're not 100%, that's going to be detrimental to a team who is going to possibly struggle putting up even first downs and just getting down the field against the number one defense in the country in Texas.
Yeah, I mean, if you're Florida, your best time to get points in this game is going to be early on, because that's if there's been at any point where Texas defense has allowed drives, it's been early on in football games, and then they typically adjust, and then you don't do anything on them. And so Florida, the key, if you're a Florida fan, the key to the game for you, in my opinion, I haven't watched all your games, so I can't speak fully to it, but is jump out ahead early. Get a lead early, make Texas play from behind, and that will give you a chance. I feel like if Florida falls behind early, if Texas kind of gets their mojo back, like we've been talking about, it could get out of hand. And offensively for them, it's going to be about big plays through the passing game and then some type of consistency running the ball. As far as with wide receivers, you mentioned that they're missing their top wideout, but Elijah Badger is a guy that sticks out when you watch film. He has 24 catches, 560 yards. That's good for just over 23 yards a catch. And I think that's a pretty good resemblance of this passing game for Florida. Is their completion percentage hasn't been great this year, but when they've hit big. I mean, I think DJ Lagway the other week it was like 6 of 12 for 200 and something, 250 yards or something like that. So they're going to be looking to try to get the run game going, then play action, get deep shots.
They might be without two of their top three wide receivers, and Eugene Wilson, the third, who is definitely out in this game. He's got 19 receptions, 266 yards, 1 touchdown. But yeah, he's their third leading wide receiver with that stat line. And Aiden Warner is the name that you're looking for the third string quarterback, redshirt freshman transfer from Yale, who had to come in and relieve the injured DJ Lagway in the Georgia game a week ago. All right, Jake, let's flip sides. I think this is really where we've honed in, whether that be Wednesday shows with the keys to victory and or just key matchups that we talked about in yesterday's episode. This defense this Florida defense against the Texas offense, players need to step up for Texas. If Texas plays their A-plus game, this could get close to that 21.5 point spread that has been placed by the Vegas odds makers in this game. With that being said, Texas hasn't always lived up to those expectations. What is the key for Texas's offense to have success against this Florida defense? What are they looking out for?
I think the main thing is going to be I need to see stellar pass protection again. Florida generates a lot of pressures through bringing an unexpected blitzer, through showing bluffs at the line of scrimmage, bringing one or two of the guys backing others back, which has been what has hurt this Texas offense. When you press those corners, you keep safeties deep, you try to generate pressure. You don't let them just do a quick pass out to get an extension of the run game. And that's kind of been the formula as of lately to slow down this Texas offense. That's a lot of what Vanderbilt did in the second half. They started pressing up at the line of scrimmage, keep the two safeties deep, don't allow deep shots, don't allow the quick game. And then rely on getting sacks and not opening up that intermediate passing game. And so that's going to be the key. I think if the intermediate passing game's on point, which involves pass protection being on point, which isn't just the offensive line, that's also the running backs, that's also the tight ends, that's everyone involved with pass protection, even Quinn, making the right calls at the line, whatever calls he's in charge of. And then for Quinn, reading those defenses when they're showing you bluffs, don't just throw it to the linebacker over the middle of the field. You have to see that in a game like this and avoid those mistakes while still being confident and taking shots downfield when someone's open, or taking those intermediate shots when they're there, which that's how you can always kind of tell if Quinn's playing to his level. If he's at his normal level, he's completing around 80% of those intermediate passes. In the last few weeks, it's been around 50% or less.
Yeah.
And so that'll be the main thing I'm watching with this Texas offense.
Now, if you listen to yesterday's episode, you'll know this, but 16 players listed on the injury report. And Jake, 5 defensive backs on that injury report for Florida. So they're either banged up, they're out, they're going to be hampered, they're playing with their depth. And Texas actually has film on some of those guys against Georgia. And so Quinn, again, should be set up for success, especially getting guys like an Isaiah Bond back that should only emphasize and help elevate his play to get it back on track to where it needs to be to lead this team to where they want to get to, which is the national championship. All right, Jake, let's go ahead, dive into some predictions for the Texas Longhorns, unless you've got anything else that you want to touch on real quickly before we get to that point.
Yeah, the last thing I was going to mention about their defense, because I have to mention this because it's crazy. They have a defensive tackle who weighs 450 pounds, and he plays. He can't play very many snaps, but he doesn't get moved. And so all that to say, Florida was allowing a lot of rushing yards at the start of the season. They have slowly been shoring that up. And even Georgia struggled at times to consistently run the ball well against them. So it'll be interesting to watch if Texas tries to run it a lot earlier, or if it's a pass to open up the run scenario, because Florida, other than him, all their defensive linemen seem to weigh between 325 to 350 pounds, and some of them are pretty fast, or at least quick.
They're athletic.
They are big physical bodies that are hard to move. And so seeing how Texas tries to attack them in the run game is also going to be an interesting thing to watch, just because Florida's huge up front.
All right, Jake, let's go ahead and before we give game predictions in terms of final scores, let's do some individual performances or some notable predictions that you want to make, whether that be maybe an over and under on penalties or whatever that might look like. What are some predictions going into this game for the Texas Longhorns that you may have?
Yeah, I mean, I'd kind of mentioned to you that if I set the over-under penalties at 6, because I think that's a good line, where if you're at that or over that, I think Texas had a bad game penalty-wise, because this is a game where a point of emphasis for an entire week with no game has been, we got to cut down on penalties. And
I mean, essentially 2 weeks.
Yeah, essentially 2 weeks of focusing on cutting out the penalties. And the bye week, a lot of dedication from what Sarkisian has said, it went to stopping penalties. The offensive line mentioned they had to do push-ups for anything pre-snap, and they kept adding on to the amount they were having to do. And I promise you, they're not just doing 5 or 10 push-ups. So sure, it hasn't been fun. And so it's a home game. It's a game where you should be feeling pretty fresh. I think anyone who didn't need to practice during the bye week probably was resting and in the training room and rehabbing. And so I want to see them come out and commit, fewer than 6 penalties. Yeah. And to me, that would be a success, because penalties are going to happen. You're never going to avoid them. Refs are going to make bad calls. Players are going to, accidentally have a hold or kind of twitch before snap. Stuff does happen. But I think if you're under that 6 mark, for some reason, that number just came to my mind. I think then you've had a pretty good game.
Again, it's also just when these penalties are happening. opening kickoff, you're going to get a holding penalty from your 15-yard line, and the very first opening drive on the road against a ranked Vanderbilt team is inside your 5-yard line. You convert a 3rd down and 5 on a run play, on an off-tackle run, and your tight end commits a holding penalty, and it brings you back, 10 yards from that point. So there's so many different things of like, yeah, you can have some penalties, but are these timely penalties? And it's never a great time to commit a penalty. Sure, I get that, but you can't take yards and points off the board and then also allow your opponent to get points. 4th down, you get a pass interference that puts your opponent in field goal range or inside their own red zone. A 3rd and 8, you get a defensive holding, automatic 1st down. They end up getting points on that drive. What are these penalties going to result as? Now, that's my biggest thing is like, yeah, you can have, 5, 6 penalties. What were the end results? Did that absolutely destroy your drive? Did you take points off your own scoreboard, or did you add points to the opponent's scoreboard? I think that was something that was a big point of emphasis for me that stood out in that Vanderbilt game of what turned the tides and what made that game as close as it was.
Yeah, I mean, penalties in that game made probably total, if you add up the points that Texas took off the board for themselves and added onto the board for Vanderbilt, that's probably 20 to 30 points.
It was
worth of penalties in that game.
It was. Yeah, without a doubt. All right, Jake. Any personal, any individual player predictions you want to make?
Yeah, I'm gonna take the low hanging fruit this time. I haven't done this much this year.
Yeah.
Give me Quinn Ewers for MVP of the offense in this game. I'm gonna ride with Quinn in this because I have been critical of him and mentioning statistics, but I've said all along the way he is QB1 and Texas needs him to win a national title this year. I think this is the week where he shows up, maybe plays a clean game, no interceptions, hits a deep shot, gets that intermediate passing game. I think that bye week was big for him. I think Sark being able to show him, I think probably that Georgia game was brutal for him in the film room. And then for Sark to be able to show him specific plays in the Vanderbilt game where it's like, look at this. This is what you're doing earlier in the year. This is exactly what it needs to feel like, whether it be that 3rd and long throw to Silas Bolden for a 1st down, whether it be a handful of throws where he took a shot straight to the face, stepped into the throw, and delivered a good ball. There were several great throws he had in that game, and now you just need to see him doing that on a consistent basis, setting his feet, being confident that when he sees something there, he throws it. And so it's not even not having an interception in this game that is the most important thing to me. It is just hitting those 7 to 15 to 19-yard type passes on a consistent basis, because I think that's where they're really going to be able to feast on this Florida defense. And then on the defensive side of the ball, this is where it's just pick your choice. I'm going to go with Anthony. I'm going to take low-hanging fruit again. I'm going to go with Anthony Hill to have a huge game and be the MVP of the defense, because I think this is a game where the linebackers need to feast.
Jake, I'm going to go one prediction in the score, or in terms of how the game is going to be played. I'm going to say that it's going to hit for the football cycle. I think Texas is going to get a special teams touchdown. I'm going to go ahead and call a Silas Bolden punt return for a touchdown. I'm going to say a Jahdae Barron pick 6, and I'm going to, obviously the offense is going to score, but I'll go ahead and just say a Jaden Blue touchdown just to, give a prediction or something like that. But yeah, I think that they hit for the football cycle, if you will, and get a touchdown in all 3 phases. We're going to see a complete game from this Texas Longhorn football team. It's going to look good. It's going to look crisp. That's what I want to see. I don't even care what the final score is. Obviously, if Texas wins, I care. But in terms of a blowout, covering the spread, I don't care if it's a 21-point victory. I want it to look crisp, clean, and concise, and almost mistake-free, where it just looks like it's that 60 minutes of hell that we were honing in on early in the season, the first 5 weeks of the season. That's kind of tapered off. We haven't talked too much about it because we're just like, get back on track. This is the week that happens. All right, final prediction, Jake, score.
I've thought a lot about this one. I think the spread is just way too much. I don't think Florida's that bad of a football team, and Texas hasn't looked consistent as of recently. I think Texas ends up winning this one by around 17 points. I'm going to go 37-20. I'm almost hesitant to pick Florida to score that many points, but I like that 17-point margin. I like the offense to score some points. Like you said, I think they're going to get a touchdown from elsewhere than just the offense. And maybe Florida gets a special teams touchdown or something that helps them get to that 20 points. But for some reason, that's the score that just came to mind.
I'm going to go 30-13. Texas wins this game, and I think I think it's going to come from all three phases of this game. And I think some fans, if you told them that it was going to be a special teams touchdown, a defensive touchdown, and offensive touchdowns, and you only scored 30 points in this game, some fans may not necessarily be thrilled about that because the offense maybe not putting up as much production. But I think it's going to be a good looking game for Texas, and I think they're going to handle it pretty easily. And like we said, Florida's not a bad football team. They're not just going to go in there and get ran through.
It can be a good, crisp, clean game without it being a perfect game. You're never going to see just a perfect game for the most part from a team. It's just not how football wins. Both sides win plays, win possessions. But I think they can play a good game and win by a score, like you said.
All right, Jake, let's go ahead and move forward from Florida, Texas. We've spent 25 minutes on it. We've got about that amount of time. We've got about 5 to 10 minutes talking about the rest of the games that we want to get through for Week 11 Saturday slate. Let's start off with the big one. Number 11, Bama, favored at LSU. This is going to be a night game. 2.5-point favorites are the Bama Crimson Tide with the over-under at 59.5. Whenever I read that out loud, I said, Jake, that just doesn't seem right for Bama LSU. What world are we living in where the over-under is almost 60 points for a Bama LSU game? But we live in 2024, and that's about what these two defenses play like. Jake, my initial take on this is that I was talking to you about this earlier, and yes, the brain is saying, obviously, we need LSU to win this game. My heart's saying, I really don't.
Or Bama. We need Bama to win.
Or we need Bama to win this game. And, brain-wise says that. But also, my heart's saying, man, if this college football playoff committee is going to put an 11-seed Bama team to play Texas in the first round, I would really rather play LSU if that's the case. So that's kind of where my head is, to be 100% honest with you. But with that being said, I think LSU showed enough in that Texas A&M game of where their biggest weakness is, and that happens to be a quarterback that can use his legs and can extend plays. I think Bama has a pretty good one of those types of quarterbacks leading the way, and I think despite it, and the only thing keeping me from just saying Bama's going to win this game by 10-plus points because they are coming off of a bye week as well, LSU night game at home against a heated rival. And that's the only thing, in my opinion, keeping LSU in this game.
Yeah. I think it keeps them in the game for a few quarters. And then I think Bama wins this. I have said all along through the season, I think LSU are frauds. They showed that at College Station. And they're going to show that this week at home because I think Bama, I know Missouri was playing hurt. Missouri are frauds themselves. They did absolutely annihilate Missouri. And for a Bama team that was looking inconsistent, that wasn't looking great at times throughout the season, that felt like we're riding the ship. I do think DeBoer is a very good head coach. I think Milroe is a pretty good college quarterback. And I don't think LSU is going to be able to stop them on a consistent basis. While I think Alabama has plenty of routes to stop LSU. So I think Alabama wins this game 37-23.
All right, Jake, go ahead, get into that number 3 Georgia Bulldog game at Ole Miss. Georgia only 2.5-point favorites on the road against this Rebels team. Over-under sitting at 54.5. Georgia hasn't looked great. Ole Miss might be playing the best football that they've played all season long.
This game is entirely contingent on how Ole Miss's offensive line plays. When their offensive line has been, when they've struggled, it's been up front. Defensively, I think Ole Miss can give Georgia a lot of problems in this game. If Carson Beck plays like he did against Texas, plays like he did against Florida, I don't think they get out with a win. That said, I think Georgia is going to play similar to how they did against Texas. I think their defense is going to dominate. I think they're going to force some mistakes. I think they win. I think it'll be fairly close. I think it's going to be kind of an ugly game, and they squeak it out 24-17.
Last year, this game was played at Georgia, and it was an annihilation. And Georgia won, I believe, like 53-13, or it was just it was uninteresting after the first quarter of play. That's not to say these types of games don't just flip on their head. We've seen that Texas OU. We've seen that happen before in college football. I don't think it's going to be that big of a blowout on either side. I think Georgia wins by a final second field goal in this game. I think as time expires, Georgia's going to end up breaking the hearts of Ole Miss, and I think that really just goes down to, and as lame as a analytical point of view as this is, what I'm about to say is, I think it just comes down to brands. Georgia wins these games. At the end of the day, Kirby Smart wins these games. Lane Kiffin loses these games at the end of the day, and I think that's what's going to happen on Saturday. But I do think Ole Miss is going to give Georgia everything that they've got. All right, not lastly, but let's go ahead and move it to our next game. Michigan at number 8, Indiana. Indiana 14-point favorites over the Wolverines, 49.5-point favorites. I think Indiana might put up 49 points themselves. They're certainly capable of it. I like Indiana in this game, and I don't think it's going to be particularly close. I think Indiana, their defense isn't bad. Their offense puts up points. We just ran down the scores in our last episode as to kind of where they stand in the college football rankings. They should probably deserve to be higher than number 8. If their name wasn't Indiana, if their name was Ohio State or Oregon, they probably would be at much higher ranked. I've got Indiana covering the spread. I think they win by 3 or 4 scores.
Yeah, I think Vegas is showing their respect for Indiana by having them as a 14-point favorite, and I think it's warranted. I think they win this game big. I think they win by 3 touchdowns, maybe even 4 possessions, and I don't think it's going to be close. I think they'll put this away pretty early.
Yeah, Jake, moving right along. South Carolina, 2 teams that I think should be ranked in the top 25 that are not ranked in the top 25. South Carolina Gamecocks, they're coming off of definitely the biggest win in their head coach's tenure there at South Carolina. 3.5-point favorites at Vanderbilt. If this game was played at South Carolina, I don't even know if we'd be covering this game because I think we would just say South Carolina in a blowout win over Vandy. However, with this game being at Vandy, I know Vandy's home crowd, if you say all 20 students that are going to be, cheering as loud as they can, for whatever reason, they play much better at home. Over-under is at 45.5 points. I think South Carolina wins this game, but I think Vandy's going to give them everything they've got.
I like the over in this game. I like South Carolina in this game. They're one of the best teams in college football at sacking the quarterback. I think they're going to give Vanderbilt's offensive line a lot of issues. And I think offensively, South Carolina, they can just run the football on you. And then they are very effective in the play action passing. They just handled that A&M front that I do think pretty highly of. And unless South Carolina just plays a bad football game, it's hard to imagine, unless Pavia really just creates some magic, them being able to win this game. I think South Carolina is just much, much better than their record. I think they are a top 15 or a top 17 team in the country, with little doubt in that. Yeah. And so I think they win this game fairly easily at the end of the day.
Well, also, they're the only team in the country that lotions up in baby oil before they go out there because they're impossible to tackle. All right,
Hashtag
Jake.
Loopgate.
Loopgate. I will never forget that. All right, Jake, this is a big one in the Big 12. Number 20, Colorado, 3.5-point favorites traveling to Lubbock at Texas Tech. Texas Tech coming off of what could have been the biggest spoiler in the Big 12, taking on and beating Iowa State a week ago, 23-22. And in an ugly, nasty weather game, this over-under sitting at 62.5. I'm tempted to take the over in it as well. Colorado, they're playing really good football. They had probably the best week of any college football team during the bye week. They definitely won the bye. I'm going to wait to give my opinion after you give yours.
Oh, that's not fair, but this is a game where Texas Tech is still kind of in the race for the Big 12 title game. If they win, they get back in it. It's going to be in Lubbock, so I'm sure the environment's going to be rocking. But I have come to respect Colorado's defense at this point. They have played really well this year. They played right there with K-State, though that was at Colorado, and K-State appears to be a bad road team. But I think I do not think Texas Tech is going to be able to stop Colorado consistently. And I think Colorado's defense is going to find stops, at least enough to win this game. I'm riding the over because life's too short to bet the under, and that is just way too high of one for me not to have fun with.
Yeah.
And I like Colorado in this game. I do think it's going to be a really close game. I think it's going to be a really fun game. I think it's going to be one of the funnest games of the weekend.
I agree with that. Here's where I am. Texas Tech is coming off of an emotional victory. We see this every single week in college football, whether it's an upset, whether it's just a big win to keep your season alive, whatever it is. This was a last second drive, final second score to beat an undefeated Iowa State team on the road. And now you've got to host another team that is fighting to even win the conference and make the college football playoffs. I think Colorado's going to handle them. And I don't think it's necessarily going to be like that blowout where it's just like over at the end of the game. I think these two teams are going to fight back and forth. I think there's going to be a couple of possessions where Texas Tech scores 14 unanswered. Colorado answers with a 17-run unanswered run themselves. And then Texas Tech might put another couple touchdowns on the board. But I do think Colorado takes care of business in this game and wins by, maybe 10 points. Jake, let's go ahead, move it right along real quickly. Oklahoma at Mizzou. Why are we talking about this game? A lot of people probably not even going to turn their TV on this game. I find it a little bit interesting. Oklahoma favored over number 24 Mizzou, 2.5 point favorites on the road against a ranked opponent.
It just moved to 3, actually.
And it just moved to 3.
Since we wrote these notes, not that long ago, like an hour or two ago, the line has moved. That tells me that Cook's probably not playing. And if Cook's not playing, I do think Oklahoma actually wins this game because I don't think Missouri will score a single point. I still think OU has a good defense. I do think the buy-in or the re-buy-in to Jackson Arnold is hilarious, all because they put up, I think it was like over 25% of their point production on the season was in that game
against
Maine. Against Maine, FCS unranked 500 Maine. But that said, at Missouri, if they don't have Cook, they don't look that good with Cook. They look putrid without Cook.
Without him, yeah.
And so I think Oklahoma wins this game. They probably extend Venables 5 years for beating their big time rival Mizzou.
Oh yeah, took them down. All right, Jake. Last game that we're going to talk about: Washington at number 6 Penn State. Penn State coming off that loss against Ohio State. Can they get back on track? Washington, not a bad. They're a little feisty. I'm not saying that they're a bad football team. I'm not necessarily saying they're even a really good football team. I'm saying they're a feisty team. They play for something week in and week out. They've got a good culture in Washington. Traveling to Penn State, however, Penn State staying at home for 2 straight weeks. Almost two touchdown favorites are the Nittany Lions. And I believe this is the whiteout game. I think this Saturday is the whiteout game.
Here it is. I'm rolling the dice with this. I do not believe in this Penn State game. I think the fact that the majority of their games are close, regardless of the competition, this is a game where it catches up to them against a feisty team. It's at home. If it's a whiteout, that gives me a little more hesitation, but I just don't believe in this Penn State team. I thought with the offense coordinator from Kansas coming over that would change things for them. And while the offense looks better at times,
they did score a touchdown against Ohio State, and they were in the 5-yard line 3 times in that game.
It just doesn't matter when you have a quarterback that isn't athletic, and then isn't that impressive of a pocket passer. And I think it catches up to them this week, and they lose a second game in a row where you think, okay, Penn State's going to get right. And then they just drop out of they'll be eliminated from the college football playoff after this.
Oh, absolutely will be. And Jake, I'm going to go ahead. I'll take Penn State. I think it's going to be an ugly, low scoring, just nasty game for whatever reason. It's not going to look good. I think their confidence is a little bit shook. I think they're trying to right the ship, and I'm not quite sure who the captain is of that ship right now. And so I'm almost on your bandwagon with the upset, but since you picked it, I'll let you have it. But yeah, I'll go Penn State narrowly defeating Washington in this one. Well, that's going to do it for our show, Jake. Texas, Florida, we will have our immediate reaction following that game on Saturday. So it'll probably be around 3:30-ish time frame that we'll get that episode posted for you. Texas, Florida at 11 o'clock in Austin. And we are very much looking forward to this one. It's been a couple weeks since we've got to see our Longhorns play. We're hoping it's a good one. And again, we release these episodes 5 days a week, Tuesday through Friday, dropping at noon, and then Saturday immediately after the game. This is your daily fix for all things Texas Longhorns right here on All In Horns, brought to you by Rogue Sports Network. I'm Tanner Carlson. That's Jake Jimerson. Huck 'em.
All in Sports Network. We love sports.